Marty Wilsey.
What's up? I'm Shane McGalley.
And I'm David Keener.
And this is the Hourlings podcast project. Tonight, Shay's driving a bus. Shay, take it away.
All right. So at our last happy hour, I talked about the fact that I'm getting into model airplanes again, which means that I have lots of little pieces of plastic all over my table and open glue and open paint and a very unhappy mom. So I have been nominated to then lead this discussion on air flying machines, anything you'd see in the air that is a machine that we can talk about in writing and in storytelling, and that can cover a lot of ground. So I'm thinking dirigibles, I'm thinking planes, I'm thinking helicopters, I'm thinking weird things that you can bicycle and it spins something around and you float. I'm thinking all of the above, pun intended. So
jetpacks.
Exactly. But I want to talk about this in the context of writing, not just talking about planes. But before I do that, my first question is, we've talked on the show about knowing your stuff, like with guns, with even like breeds of dog and that kind of thing, being very specific and knowledgeable when you write. Do you think the same applies to flying machines in literature, or do you think that there's a little wiggle room because they're so big and so varied and all of the above?
I think it probably would apply depending on what kind you're talking about.
Okay.
Certain genres really demand airships, like steampunk often includes dirigibles in it, for instance.
Right.
It is really important that you research it enough so that you understand what allows a dirigible to fly and what their capabilities are. It would be bad if you, treated it like it flew like a jet when it's
well, not even like a jet, but like I've written a novel once that had a dirigible, and I was making the mistake of describing it like a blimp. And there's a big difference there as far as like the structure of the craft.
Right, the architecture of those two things is different.
Right, exactly. So I had to make that distinction. So you're right. So I think that like the basic stuff you should probably nail down. But as far as like, the really engineering type details, I feel like authors get a pass on that. Am I wrong?
No, I think that
depends on what detail you're talking about. Yeah. If you're writing a steampunk story that has dirigibles that have rigid skeletons and are floating because they're filled with hydrogen, that could be a very big plot point.
No, I think what I'm saying is like, is an author required to know what every little switch on the control panel does?
No, and that's where I'll say you need enough detail to make the reader believe that this is plausible in your world. You don't need to if you say the plane has rudders, people understand that, but you don't have to describe the hydraulic system and how they work, and you don't have to talk about the position of particular buttons on the control panel. You don't even have to talk about how air flowing under a wing generates lift, because people are familiar with planes, for example. Yeah. But you have to be plausible. Details.
I agree with that. Just enough to be plausible. Do you guys remember we did something where I had you raise your hand? On the bottom, there's a little reaction thing. You see that?
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a little exercise. I want to know, raise your hand if you've ever written a story where a plane is central to the story. Okay. How about a helicopter? All right. How about a dirigible or a blimp or something like that? Sort of. Okay. Well,
in the future, maybe. I have plans, but nothing yet.
Okay. I'm raising my hand for a dirigible blimp. I wrote a steampunk novel. That was a pretty central characteristic of that novel. Interesting. All right. I thought I'd see more hands up, and I was going to make the argument that this is a frequent occurrence in fiction, but maybe it's not. We're thinking about doing an episode on spacecraft, so I imagine when I say that, everyone's hand is going to go up. But as far as stuff in this atmosphere,
can I change my answer?
Yeah, for which one?
I did have an aircraft that was central to a story of mine called Pivot Point. It was an airship.
Okay.
but it was only central for like the first chapter because the story starts after the blimp has, after the airship has crashed in a huge aerial battle, and everything else proceeds on the ground.
Interesting. Well, I will say that I think that there is a general rule of thumb in fiction writing where if you want to make your character more badass, make that character a pilot of some sort. I'm thinking of, I'm still on the high of Top Gun, Maverick this summer, and what's that, Dave?
That was a good movie.
Oh, good movie. Yes, absolutely.
Better than the first one.
I think so. I loved it a lot. Yeah, I mean, I love seeing characters operating flying machines. It's so cool. It inspires your imagination, gets you making models again. So what's your favorite character from a story, fiction, movie, TV show that's a pilot?
Oh, I didn't have time to look over my collection.
Oh, you have a lot?
Let's see, I'm trying to think. I mean, the first one I really recall was Star Wars with Luke Skywalker and firing on the Death Star. And, man, I was what, 13 years old when that came out? Man, that was
Han Solo is a great, from that same universe, Han Solo.
Yeah, that movie, that flying sequence, that was the bomb.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Han Solo, great pilot.
Yeah. When you have those characters, you have the opportunity for like Dave said, like those flying scenes or dog fights, flying races. I wrote one of those ones. They're really fun. So just, opens up a lot of options. What do you guys think about like advanced flying machines versus more antiquated ones? So like jets versus, I don't know, we could go back to dirigibles with blimps or World War I type aircraft.
I think it depends on what your story
Yeah,
needs.
what your story's going to be, because I think you got a lot more flexibility on where you can go with something like a dirigible, because you can land those things anywhere. You can't land an F-16, in a clearing in the forest.
Well, although if you're writing science fiction, your futuristic combat jet might be able to just land and take off
right
vertically.
Right.
So
Science
you
fiction,
can play
whole
with
different thing. If you've got shuttles with anti-gravity and stuff like that, it's a whole different ball game.
All right.
I guess
if you're Civil War prisoners escaping their prison in a balloon and you get blown to an island where Nemo is and there's giant animals, that's a whole different story.
Yeah, I also think there's some differences too. If you think, for instance, about Top Gun, it's really one or two people in a jet fighting against, one or two people in each of the other jets that they might be fighting. So it's almost like personal combat, albeit with jets strapped on. And then I think about some of the dirigible fights or some of the more esoteric airships that might depend on something like float wood, magical float wood to allow them to float through the air. And you start getting into that wooden ships and iron men and cannons in the sky and that kind of, crew versus crew combat, which I find pretty exciting as well.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about steampunk being a very relevant genre for this. Are there any other genres that you think have a pretty big piece of the pie when it comes to flying machines?
Diesel punk.
Diesel punk, all right.
Yeah, there's a lot of subgenres of steampunk or parallel genres that do include flying machines. You get something like a retro story that's got flying aircraft carriers, stuff like that. That is pretty interesting. That even exists in is it Marvel Universe?
I would say I guess this is not really a genre. You could maybe a thriller genre. But the glorification of plane disasters seem to be a genre of its own. I mean, I'm thinking like something wild, like snakes on a plane, or even Lost, and something not as wild, like Castaway. You know, getting a plane crash on an island. You know, I mean, there's all sorts of real life examples, unfortunately, of very mysterious and terrifying plane disasters, like the Malaysia flight. They just had a documentary come out about that. So I don't know. I think that there is sort of the same way that humans seem to have a fascination with scary shark stories. You know, like shark attacks. Like we're just kind of fascinated by it, but we're terrified of it. I sort of feel there's the same situation going on with plane disasters. What do you guys think?
It's very engaging stories. I know my wife loves that stuff. You know, I don't like watching it. It's, you know,
I know it's. I don't
watching
like
a plane crash. You know, I just want to avert my eyes
I
thinking
know
about
it's terrifying.
all
I
the poor
know.
people on this plane.
Yeah,
Well,
I know.
I think there's some fascination with it because it's the one time you're in the sky in a big metal tube with wings,
Going fast.
going fast, and you are not in control. There's
Yeah.
a guy up front, or this is the modern era. It could easily and rightfully be a woman pilot just as well.
Mhm.
And they're in control. And if something happens, there's nothing you can
Well,
really
not so
do.
much anymore. It pretty much is computer controlled the whole way, which is just as scary.
Hey, I know the AI could say, "Oh my gosh."
Well, and sure, and there's been incidents where the computer has done something that the pilots didn't understand and didn't necessarily want, right?
Yeah.
And then it's the
And
race.
that would be a good story,
Yeah.
you know?
Also, and this was before your time, Shay, but there was a big series of movies in God, I think it was the late 70s called Airport,
Oh, yeah.
which was
I picked
about
the wrong day to stop sniffing glue.
no, that was
Oh, I'm
Airplane.
kidding. That's Airplane.
Airplane was a reaction to the airport movies. There was like 5 or 6 of them. Um, and it was all about a disaster happening in the sky, and then all the forces arrayed. You know, the pilot's dead, and the co-pilot's been injured. You know, the stewardess has to land the plane, and somebody's got to teach her how to land, but something else is damaged and stuff.
Sorry for my dog. My sister just came home from a long trip, and my dog just goes crazy when she arrives. So you might hear some whooping in the background. But continue, Dave. Sorry about that.
Well, what was usually fascinating about those stories is the plane was in the air when the disaster happened. I think in one of them, a terrorist actually set off a bomb, and there was a hole in the plane, and the hydraulics were damaged, and they couldn't control the wings. And
Yeah, didn't the captain come back and try to talk him down, and captain got killed too, and stuff like
yeah,
that?
something like that. But
Yeah.
the point was, it was the people on the plane coming together with what was left of the crew, aided by people on the ground trying to help them to actually get everybody down safely. So it's kind of a riveting. Is this plane going to fall out of the sky, and how soon? And by the way, they need to fix it before it runs out of fuel. Oh, and by the way, they're leaking fuel. You know.
I'm gonna try this hand thing again. I was disappointed with the results last time. So let's try this again. Raise your hand if you've ever flown in a helicopter. What? I'm the only one?
No, I have.
Yeah, you didn't raise your hand.
How does it do it?
Reactions and then raise hand. Bottom.
You can do a thumb or a hand.
Then you haven't. There you go. You applauded, but that's good enough. No for you, Dave.
I've never been on a helicopter.
Okay.
There
I was. There you go. I was in a helicopter for my 21st birthday in Vegas. I paid for like a half-hour flight, and it is the myths are true. It is really loud in there. You can't hear anything unless you have the mics attached to each other's headphones. I thought that was always like an exaggeration for like thriller military movies, but no. And it's definitely a different experience than like flying in a plane, don't you think, Marty?
I've actually flown a helicopter before.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it is very cool, except it's very unnerving when the airspeed reaches 0.
Now, so I know you've flown commercial aircraft too, personal aircraft.
Yeah, like small aircraft. I can fly small aircraft.
What
In fact, I just did that recently. My wife bought me an hour for my birthday. It was a ton of fun.
Was it a Beechcraft?
I've flown a lot of small planes, but flying a helicopter is dramatically different.
Yeah, absolutely. Was it a Beechcraft or a Cessna? Where'd you fly?
Well, the small light planes I do are Cessna 150s or 170s typically.
Okay.
They're really small, little two-seaters where your shoulders are touching each other and the wall. And,
I have big plans when I sell a lot of books, Marty. I want to buy a Beechcraft Baron. And I want to learn to fly it. Yep. So it's on their list. We're blessed in this area to live near the Air and Space Museum. And they have wonderful artifacts. Many of them I'm building in miniature models. Some of the very famous planes. And in the summer, they have sort of a show where a bunch of pilots bring their own personal aircraft. And that's where I saw the Beechcraft Baron. And I was looking, I think I can attach a ramp to the back there. I think I can roll in there. We can make this work. And so that was a lot of fun. But anyway, I think our last episode was castles. We talked about how people have a soft spot. Their imagination just goes wild. I think there's a similar atmosphere, pun intended, for planes and aircraft and airships and all of that jazz. It just makes your imagination soar. I'm full of puns tonight. I love it. But I think that's all I got for airplanes and aircraft.
I have one. I think there's also a difference. Like nowadays, we're used to like planes as transport. It's getting from point A to point B fast. But in the age of like dirigibles and stuff, the journey was part of it.
It was a luxury. You're right.
You were on a luxury aircraft, taking a tour, and you had windows so you could look out at the aerial view.
That's
as you went over the mountains and stuff. And that
while you're eating a gourmet meal.
Yeah, and that's something you don't get on the airplanes. It's here's your microwave meal.
Great point for storytelling too, because when you're writing a story and a character catches a plane, you could just end the chapter and not show any of the plane ride and then just go to the destination. But you might have some interesting opportunities in stories that have dirigibles or blimps where the travel was slower to have some chapters on the machine, right? I mean, show what's in. I did that in my steampunk novel. I always had a couple of chapters at least that were actually on the dirigible and described the location and the views. And like you said, it's really a good opportunity. So you're right. The journey is something brilliant to write about.
And I'd also point out that steampunk airships, you get pirates too.
Oh yes.
Now you might hijack an airline, by sneaking somebody on. That's harder nowadays.
Yeah.
But there's no pirates in the air, coming and boarding the plane in midair and taking it. That's not plausible.
It could be a riveting adventure. Anyway, last word on anything in the air.
It's making me want to watch or want to write a steampunk.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah, it's making me want to write more stories in the steampunk world I was talking about earlier.
Excellent. I'm happy that this has inspired you guys. Maybe I should too. So we can make it 3 for 3. That's it. Fly high, subscribers.
Like and subscribe. It helps with the algorithm.
Yeah.
Make it happen.
Thanks for skydiving in.
And we'll see you next week.